Welcome to this next webinar. Within the limitations of time, I'm going to briefly cover everything Koha Circulations today, including the user accounts and transactions and the normal processes that go along with circulation. Nothing is going to be too detailed though, because we haven't really got the time. But as with all of these videos, please do contact us if you'd like to know a little bit more. So I have started with a little volunteer screen at the moment, and this one has limited options here, limited permissions. And the reason I've started with this one is to say that everything in Koha, all the modules are permission based. And this one has a very limited view. You'll know that because when I, for instance, check in the catalogue button here, there is only the option to do a quick catalogue record, which would be required if this was a person that only does a bit of circulations on the desk, and they might find one that comes through without a barcode, and they only really need to do the quick cataloguing. As I'm doing this anyway, worth noting that Koha has got two main ways of always getting back to the home screen. One is the little home shape here, and one is the little swoosh, which is the Koha. So I'm just going to use the little home button. Also, throughout this demonstration, you'll notice that the green search bar along the top and the black bar are always there. But the green bar will change depending on what module you're in to show a different type of search. So it tries to be logical about what search you will need based on the screen you are on. I'm just going to cover a little bit about the home screen itself, because there are some things here that are related to circulation, and these stay the same, whichever permissions you happen to have. So the first thing to mention is the news panel on the left. And this we have used in this case to use quite a few circulation functions that happen every day. So these are processes that need doing every day. So you've got your holds to pull, which is your reservations list, and you've got your transfers to receive. Even that means if you've got multiple sites, you might have items that are coming between sites. And then we've got the holds awaiting pickup. So those are the ones that have already been checked in at the location at which they want to be picked up. And those are now on the shelf at your home location. We've also got down the middle here, or just to mention as well, that the news panel can be completely customized to contain what you would like it to contain. Then down the middle portion here, we've got article requests, and these are the ones that have been linked to your interlibrary loan module. And these are the requests that currently need dealing with. And then we've got the checkout notes pending, and this is where you might have a message on a particular item, so that when it comes through either as a return or an issue, it will pop up. And then we've got the circulation history for a patron. We've got the pull lists again, which is the holds or reservations. And we can look up some items for overdues as well. So we've got information about particular users, and we've got overdues. So they always stay on the middle panel because they are your daily processes and things that you will be doing very often. But the permissions can be very granular. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to swap my login. So I'm going to go and I'm going to log out. And then I'm going to use my particular one. So I just need to turn this on so that it remembers my password. Okay, we're all set. So I'm going to log in as myself now, who is a super user. Now you will notice that it is requiring me to set a library. And this is important. Working locations is important if you have more than one site, because it will affect obviously the transactions, so that it knows where that transaction occurred. It will affect things like your transport between sites. So I am going to log in as the main library. You can also set a desk if required, and you can set a till as required. And these again will go towards the logs of activity on the system. Now, worth noting though, that this requirement for main library can be removed if you only have one site. Okay, there's a lot more going on this particular user record, because it's got access to absolutely everything. So let's look at how those permissions are set and what options you have in there. I'm going to search for my name, and you'll note that it kind of guesses who I'm trying to find. But of course, we can also use a user code of some kind. You could beep an ID card. You could even use an RFID tag inside a card if you have the required reader attached to your machine. So I am going to go to the More button up here, and I am going to select the permissions. Now you'll notice I'm just going to scan down a little bit. In fact, I'm going to just zoom in a little. Because it's web-based, we can do this. So I'm just going to scan down the screen a little for you to show you how many selections can be made to the record. I have got all functions ticked, and that is just a quick way to create a super user. But if I show you the details just for checking out and checking in, there are also very granular choices that can be made in that area too. So that was just to show you like really what can be done. So again, I'm going to just cancel that for a moment and go back to the home screen. So there are many options to get to your checkouts and check-ins. But let's just a brief word about language. So Koha is used across the world, as you know, being open source, and its out of the box default language is American English. So that's why you might see some language that you maybe not familiar with, such as checkout and check-in. But just to reassure you that one of the many, I mean, there are over 30 languages you can choose from. One of them you can choose is British English, which will then change things like patron to user and check-in to issue, for example. You can also change a lot of the tags and menu items, names, if you require. So yeah, that's worth a note. And I've also mentioned that because it's web-based, a lot of the tools you might use with the web, such as spell checking, zooming, attaching a reader, will work with Koha too. So let's go back to the bars at the top. You will note that even though I am on the main home screen of Koha, it presumes I might want to do some issues or returns or renewals, because that's our bread and butter in the library. And that is what might be the task that kind of pops up in whichever area you might be using at the time. So there are options to get to circulations. One, you can put a patron straight in at the top. You can go to the circulation itself here, and you can also use the More button to go, and it's a pull down to go to the module that you want. But that will only show me that if I'm not on the home screen, if I'm in another screen instead. So I'm going to once again go into my record. So the reason I came out and went back in also is because if we'd have gone in the checkouts on the very limited permissions user, this screen would have looked different too. So what we are looking at now is the absolute maximum that you can see if you are a super user. So, like I mentioned before, you can search by name, you can beep the card, etc., and then you're into your borrower record. All of this information that is about the borrower, let me just edit it so you can see them choices. All of this information is set by yourselves. This is important because, for instance, if you never post out to your users, it is quite dangerous for GDPR to have that information come into the system because you're not going to use it, therefore you don't need it. So you can set what information comes through for your users. But there are also a lot of spare fields that can be used in the library setup. So say if you want to add pronouns to your user records, you can do that. There are a lot of empty slots that can add other information that's important for you to keep. We can import these records for you via connecting to another system. So, for instance, academic libraries often have a student record system. As part of implementation, we can connect this system to that. So as an overnight process, or as frequently as you'd like it to do it, the records would come through to Koha. You can also do it manually, obviously, and you can also do it by CSV file, which again, you can set as a thing that will happen overnight, or you can do it as you need it. It's important to know that when you come into a record, everything that is important to know will show in red. So in this case, I have overdues and I have charges. So everything that's important will show in red. So this is the first screen that you see when you come in. Over on the left here is everything to do with that user, all the information you have on that user. So you have their main details, which obviously you can amend. You've got the accounts, so things like what fines they've taken, their circulation history, their holds history, any notices that have gone, and statistics if you want to do individual ones for that user. Also, messages will show here at the top. I'm going to show you what it looks like when you place a message. So you have two options. You have a message that only staff will see, and you have a message that the user can see via the OPAC. So let's just put an internal note in this case. These predefined ones are entirely up to you how you create these or what they are. So these will be just things that you repeatedly send. So maybe you often have to message users to tell them that they need to come and renew, or they are blocked from using a computer, whatever it is. If that happens quite a lot, you can set up these predefined ones, or you can just create a note of your own. So I'm going to just say that there's a hold and save that one. And that then just appears here underneath the rest of the things that are for your attention. Okay, so another thing to note is if you have been on any given day, if you have been in any one user record, the last one you touched will be up here on the right, showing as last patron. This is really handy because you might be in the midst of doing something else, or you might have had to go check something out for that patron, and then you shouldn't really need to beep their card again. So you can just use that arrow to go straight back to that person. I'm just going to briefly show you that in the details section for each user, there is also a messaging preferences area. So you would set this up. You can set it up as a certain things will be inputted when you bring the record in, or you can do this with them the first time they come to the counter, for instance. But you basically will be asking them what they would how they would prefer to be contacted. So you might have, you can do this by email, you can print them. The system is set up not to do that originally, but you can add that. And if you have a text system that is integrated with your Koha, you can also send them by SMS. Okay, so let's go back to the checkout screen. So I'm going to show you what happens, which will sometimes occur when I just put in a code that it doesn't recognize. So this happens a lot. So you might have a code that's just not catalogued. You might have one that comes back and it hasn't got a code at all. But say the barcode's not found, so it's not finding that specific catalogue record. It will first tell you it's not found. If it finds any that are anything like the number that you put in, it will suggest those. So you can check them by their title and just check it out to the user that you were on the screen with. But for example, if I put one in and it really doesn't recognize it, it will just give me the option to add a fast record, which is really handy. So instead of having to say, oh, sorry, you can't have this one yet, please come back, you can add a quick catalogue record, and it will just, all it does is give you the absolute minimum information required to set up that to enable it to be issued. So I'm going to save that. No, I'm not, because it won't let me. I'm going to cancel that. And I'm going to check out one of these. I'm going to pretend it was one of these. You'll notice that it gave me another warning because it was saying I actually have some fines, but we'll cover fines in a little while. Typically of typically of any library, the staff are always the worst for having the fines and overdues. So let's look at what I currently have out and cover what's available. So you'll notice I've got quite a list here of the things that I have checked out. I'm just going to zoom out a little bit. Apologies if it makes it a little bit harder to read, but I want to be able to show the full screen at the bottom. So you'll notice that I have the option to tick individual items up here at the top, but down at the bottom, I can also renew all. So if any of these are allowed to be renewed, I could renew them all with that one button. What's really interesting though is that you'll see that here our system has a maximum of 20 or 10 renewals depending on the type of item. But I also have the option, because I'm a super user, to override any of those renewal restrictions, and I can also add a date that I would like the item to be due back at, instead of the one that would automatically appear. And then I can do a renewal. I can also, if I tick the returns, I could return them all as well, all at once. So individually as well, on each item, it will show in red if something is late. or there's an issue with it. So in this case, I have an overdue and I also have a claims returned. So on each of these items, you can make a claims returned. This means that you can add a date at which it was first claimed. You can then add further information about when the shelves were searched for that item and so on. And then the end of that process, it gives you the option to withdraw the item or to charge for the item or both. So reservation notices as well. I have some holds here. These are my current holds. You'll note that they have different pickup locations. And as long as the item hasn't yet gone, been found and gone to their pickup location, you can delete the hold and you can suspend it as well. The suspend just means that the hold will come back at a date that you suggest. So you might not need it yet, which means it's available for others to borrow it until that date. The fact that you can delete and suspend is all available also to the user in the OPAC if you have allowed them to make their own reservations without your intervention. So they can also do this on the OPAC if they want. Okay, let's go back and look at fines. So currently I have some charges on this account. So just zoom this in a little bit again. So I have these charges here and I've got the option of making a payment or pay them all off at once. I'm just going to make a payment at this stage. As soon as I click on the fines, I can also write these off if I require, and I can pay an amount, the selected, write off all, or write off selected ones. Note the ticks on the left-hand side. We can also create an invoice if required, and we can create credits. So say someone has made a payment for something, you can actually create credits too. So I'm just going to pay off an amount on my existing fines, and I'm going to just pay £2.50 off. Now it makes me select how that was paid. So obviously you can have cash, credit cards, etc. And that is up to you what is contained in those payment types. And again, if you want, you can have till numbers so that these would be an audit trail. I'm going to confirm that, and that will then take off that amount on my fines. There is also a complete log of this. All these payments, all transactions in fact, are logged, and those logs can be kept for as long as you require. So I'm going to go back to my account. I've still got my little message on there. I've still got some overdues. And I've still got some charges. So down at the bottom here, I've got my checkout still. I've got some charges still outstanding. Now then, the next thing to note, and this is of particular interest to our public library people, is that we are also able in Koha to have associated accounts. And these can be for young people, they can be for people that are being cared for by others. And basically, I can control, as the main user, I can control what happens to items, pay for fines, be aware of what's on loan, etc. And it also will show me my guarantees, charges and holds and etc. So all the same things, but with a related account. Okay, so we've done holds, we've done fines. The reservation notices, as I've mentioned, can be texted. But let's just move on now to more generalized circulation functions that are on the main screen. So I'm going to go to the main circulation screen, and you'll notice there are an awful lot more on offer here, apart from just checking in, checking out, and renewing. So you can set your library and desk, that's your location, that's up here as well. So you can set that here instead of having to log out. So you can just swap your library and desk. This is really handy because say I do work at multiple locations. Obviously, I'll want to change that when I log in, but you'd be logging in anyway, so that's less likely. But what I used to use it for a lot was, say you have a transfer, so you've requested an item from another library, and then you find you have the item, you found it, or you don't need that request anymore. It is much quicker to go in, pretend you are the receiving one, to return it, and then it will come back to you, rather than you having to go through the whole process of sending it just to get it back. So that I used to use the change your library a lot. It's very handy. You've also got a fast cataloguing link, and checkout notes is quite interesting. This is where you can place a note on any given item, just so that when it appears at the counter, you're aware of what's going on with it. This can be for items that have gone missing. It can be ones that have got very limited ability to be loaned, anything like that. You can mention that there's damage to it, etc. So those notes will stay on until someone removes them. You've got your holds queue. Again, just to remind you, that's your reservations, and these will help you. These are like daily processes or weekly process, however often you want to do it, that will allow you to go to the shelves and collect items for reservations. That only happens if you have said that available items can be reserved, and that might not be the case at your library, of course. We've included curbside pickups, which was very important, particularly to public library users during COVID, but still often in use. Hold ratios is an interesting one. This is where you have an awful lot of reservations for your items. So you can set over here what the ratio is at which it takes note of that. So say you put it as 5, if an item has been placed on a reservation between your set dates a certain number of times, it will then add it to this list. And that hold ratio can actually be used when you are ordering items in another section of Koha. So you can pick from your hold ratios for items to buy more of. We've got the bookings to collect, and that's for our little bookings circulation. So bookings are different, as in you can select a date at which you want to borrow the item. Very handy in academic libraries for projects, particular projects that are coming up that can be booked in advance, or for in public libraries to do a particular event, or for as part of a regular circulation, for instance, or for a reading club. And then we've got recalls. They're just ones that have to come back for some other reason than it being on hold. We've got our overdues over here. Again, overdues in Koha can be set entirely by you. They will go at the time you select. They will repeat at a time you select, by the method you select, and to who. You will also be allowed to change all of the text in those notices. And I've also mentioned checkout notes, but we also have article requests, and they are the ones that come through from your interlibrary loan requests, if you've got that open on the OPAC. And the reason the purchase requests are not showing on this screen is because purchase requests generally go through to ordering, to the acquisitions, rather than as part of circulation. It would come to circulation after that first part is done. And then the other one to note that might be of interest is over on the left here at the bottom. If you are using your interlibrary loans to something other than the British Library, so if you're not just receiving interlibrary loans, but you're part of a partnership or network that shares information to each other, then you can actually, this will tell you if there's any that of your items that are out to other partners. And I think that's about everything